Amol, our audience is very versed in sort of basic philosophies in cybersecurity. You want to be as proactive as possible so you don't have to see the problems and have to be highly reactive at the same time. But as I understand, with Cortex Cloud, you are trying to marry the two and give the two as much context as possible. Explain.
The first thing when you're looking at preventing risk from actually becoming risk is catching it in pre-production before you deploy infrastructure, before you deploy software. Now, in Cortex Cloud, we have best-in-class scanners which detect whether it's vulnerabilities in open source software that you're using, it's vulnerabilities in your own custom code, and provide you with very high fidelity signals so you can detect and then prevent these risks from actually making its way into the cloud. Now, as a concept, this has existed for, 10 years. Then why are we any different? Right. So one of the things that developers and DevOps folks struggle with when they're deploying and trying to break builds and prevent risk is they get inundated with the sheer volume of things that are flagged as issues or things that are wrong. Context matters in really, coming up with precise policies on what is truly a risk that you need to prevent.
If I'm following you correctly, the proactive can be very much action by action proactivity because you're trying to do your job, you're trying to do these things, and then there's a series of things that could happen when you take this action. Let me look out ahead. Let me look forward and see what could be a problem.
What you catch in pre-production before you deploy something becomes a risk once it gets deployed. And then that risk gets exploited and becomes an incident. And you're trying to sort of stop that as early as possible because it's far cheaper and more effective to fix something much earlier in any dev life cycle than do it after the fact.
Explain how the communications from the different departments work within this platform.
So firstly, we firmly believe that developers, they are not going to log into a security product or a portal for the large extent. It's very important that any signal or information or intelligence that you're providing to them, and especially when you're providing as part of their dev process, it's within the tooling that they're already using. So let's say as a plugin in their IDE environment and so on. So they get the feedback in real time, which they can act upon. So typically the way it would happen is that throughout your build pipeline, there'll be specific places where a scanner would detect if a certain package or an ISE file has a security issue. And we would marry that with the context of where this is getting deployed in runtime. And based on our policies of doing that correlation, then we would give the feedback back to the security teams and say, hey, these are the 10 things you absolutely must block. The security teams, the AppSec teams would then put that as a policy, and those builds will no longer be allowed to ship, and the developers would get the feedback on why it was blocked. So because that feedback is super important so they don't keep making that same mistake over and over again.
When something does happen in production, what is the process of remediation? Does it kind of follow the same sort of communications plan we were discussing?
What we have observed is that cloud is unique in the sense that because of technologies like containerization and open source software, there is a lot of repeatability of the things that are wrong, which means that there could be one insecure, a vulnerable package which gets used multiple times in production. So there's one thing that's wrong that's causing multiple issues to show up in your production. So remediating that at scale requires you to really tie back multiple issues down to what the root of that issue is and trace it back to where you need to fix it at source rather than trying to fix individually in production, because you'll never be able to burn all those risks down. And that's another thing we are able to do. We are able to trace back and say that these particular issues impacting your cloud environment come from this part of the code, whether it's infrastructure as code or an open source package and so on. So it allows you to drive remediation at scale highly effectively versus trying to burn down risk one at a time.
If you want to see this all in action yourself, you got to check out what they're doing and maybe take some time and sign up for a demo of Cortex Cloud. The web address to do all of that is right here at the bottom of the screen here. It's paloaltonetworks.com/cortex/cloud. Go check them out.